Hi, everybody, welcome. I'm Steven Evans. I'm Executive Director of FotoFest, and I thank you all for joining us today for another in our series of Creative Conversations Digital. We came to this digital platform when the coronavirus health crisis began, and it's been a great way for us to explore the themes that FotoFest addresses through its work. We can only do that thanks to the support of our major institutional and individual donors that include the Houston Endowment, the Brown Foundation, Inc., the National Endowment for the Arts, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the City of Houston through the Houston Arts Alliance, the Philip and Edith Leonian Foundation, the Powell Foundation, the Wortham Foundation, David and Martha Moore, the WWW Foundation, Nina and Michael Zilka, and the FotoFest Board of Directors. And we thank them all for their support. And we also would like to thank the generous supporters of the FotoFest Annual Fund that all of these donors come together to make these things possible. FotoFest is dedicated to addressing issues within society through its work. And so today's conversation, again, is timely. As we're moving through 2020, we definitely see that progress is far from linear. With a global pandemic, with the global refugee crisis, and with the crisis of violence against Black Americans here in the United States, we are dealing with a lot right now. And we're all coming together to address these issues as best we can. And we can do more. And, you know, I've been looking inside of ways I can do more, and that FotoFest can do more. And the staff has been very supportive in this, and I thank them, and the board as well. Today is World Refugee Day, and the UN has in recent years given each World Refugee Day a theme. And this year's theme is Every Action Counts. And I think that that's also particularly timely, given what the world has been going through in 2020. I did speak briefly about the violence against Black Americans here in the United States, and I wanted to reiterate that Black lives matter. They matter to all of us. And yesterday was Juneteenth, which is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. It dates back to 1865, and it was on yesterday, June 19th, but many years ago, that the Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston, Texas with news that the war had ended and that the enslaved were now free. And this was a full 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official on January 1st, 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation had little impact on the Texans due to the minimal number of Union troops that were here to enforce the new executive order. However, with the surrender of General Lee in April of 1865 and the arrival of General Granger's regiment, the forces were finally strong enough to influence and overcome the resistance. So, you know, it's particularly powerful holiday or observation here within Texas, and hopefully will become a national holiday. I know there's a movement afoot to make it so. And then going back to World Refugee Day and the United Nations, World Refugee Day has been around since the year 2000, when it was established by the UN, and it was began on June 20th. And that was a note to efforts within Africa to, from a consortium of countries to recognize African refugees on this day, June 20th. And that consortium agreed with the UN to move into World Refugee Day and have it be expanded on this day. But the history of refugees, of course, is since society began. But very notable in 1951, there was a UN refugee convention in which the rights of refugees were established by the UN, or the rights that refugees should have. You know, at the beginning, I said that progress is far from linear, and as I'm going to recite these rights to you, and that reiterates the fact that that progress is far from linear. And I think it's important for us to note this. So I'm looking at the UN website right now on another screen I have here at my desk at FotoFest. And the rights contained in the 1951 convention include the right not to be expelled except under certain strictly defined conditions, the right not to be punished for illegal entry into the territory of a contracting state, the right to work, the right to housing, the right to education, the right to public relief and assistance, the right to freedom of religion, the right to access the courts, the right to freedom of movement within the territory, and the right to be issued identity and travel documents. So these are important to hear again and to think about in reference to the xenophobia that's present worldwide, but also here, and the efforts to take these rights away from refugees that have fled from dangerous situations to try to come to other countries, including the United States. We did have an interesting Supreme Court decision upholding DACA also just in recent days. So there's been a lot to take in and note these last few days. And, you know, I would say that that was a very important ethical and moral decision that the court made to uphold DACA. We're going to be talking today to Peggy Sue Amison, and she's the artistic director of East Wing in Doha, Qatar. Amison has a long history of collaborating with numerous emerging and established international photographers, festivals, and publications. And as the artistic director of East Wing, a platform for international photography, she has supported the development of new and innovative photography. She's curated exhibitions across Europe, the United States, and China, and has written for photographic publications and many artist catalogs. Amison is a founding board member for the Belfast Photo Festival in Northern Ireland, and is the former artistic director of the Cyrus Arts Centre in Cork, Ireland. Originally from the US, Amison currently lives and works in Berlin, Germany. And she's going to talk to me today and tell us a little bit about what she's been working on. So, Peggy Sue, please come into the room with me. There you are. You look great. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Yes, in my remote location, in between two worlds.
As we all are, but you know, we've got a great audience today, so I know everyone's looking forward to hearing about In Transit and the other things that you've been working on.
Great, that's wonderful. Yeah, no, thank you so much for asking me. FotoFest has been a big part of my career over the years, and I've really benefited from the artists that I've met and the networks that I've been able to establish by attending. So I'm really happy to be here. Really honored that you asked me.
It's our pleasure. It really is. And you've been a great participant too, especially around the biennials and the Meeting Place portfolio review. And our friendship's grown over recent years since I came in here. So it's really nice to be talking to you today.
Great. I'm really happy to be here.
So let's talk about In Transit. And perhaps talk about its relationship to World Refugee Day or the global refugee crisis, some of the themes in it?
Well, I mean, first of all, when you read those rights, to me, it's none of that's happening, basically. And when you see this work, you'll see that it's true, that people are not being given the right to work or educate or become even part of the cultural life that goes on in different countries. I mean, I understand that people are overwhelmed, but it is, if you're going to make rules like that, they're non-existent at this point. The reason I brought together this exhibition, at the time I was asked by a colleague to curate something, and at that time it was 2017, I guess, and 2016, and we were seeing this mass migration, and I was fortunate to be working with some artists who were doing in-depth, long-term programs, projects with artists where it was quite collaborative. And so that was really important to me, to create an exhibition where the audience could put themselves in the shoes of this ambiguous idea of what is a refugee, what is a migrant. But then also I wanted to talk a lot about what what also I wanted to talk about was the idea of how we use photography to tell a story. What tools do we use? What methods do we use? And how these artists bring that into their projects. So that will also be obvious when we look through the work. Everything from performance to staging to filmmaking to the different materials they use. So as artists using photography, how they communicate their projects. So that was really important to me as well. And in terms of how it relates to World Refugee Day, I think it just brings the issues right up front.
Yeah, it's as you said, so many of these things are not being recognized by any countries, and we've seen that. Before we had the coronavirus crisis, there was a lot of focus on the global refugee crisis across the world, and how boats were being left at sea because they wouldn't be admitted to a country.
Right.
So they wouldn't even be admitted, let alone have access to these rights within certain countries. So it's and we've seen our own issues at the southern border here in the United States as well, which have been very disturbing.
Well, I mean, the whole idea that the number of young people who are incarcerated right now in the US who came over either on their own or with parents and were separated, and those that have been lost, they don't know where they went, and we're talking thousands, we're not talking 100. So it's a very shocking time to be looking at this subject. I mean, like, the reason Daniel Castro Garcia started his project was because 2 ships had capsized in the Mediterranean, and the way the British press was talking about those who had perished were everything from cockroaches to criminals. And he is first generation immigrant. His parents came from Galicia to the UK. So this is a personal story for him as well. And you see this, the one thing about all the artists in this exhibition is they all have some sense of displacement, whether it was chosen by them or it was something that they were born into. So that's a big part of the show as well.
How about, could we see some of the images from the exhibition?
Yeah, I was going to start because you wanted me to talk a little bit about how I came to
That's
photography.
right.
So I think what I'd like to do is I'll start with that, and then we'll lead into that. That'll make it very clear as to how I got to In Transit and what, and then we can go through the artists. And I do have quite a few slides, but I do move through them pretty quickly. So
Okay.
it'll be all right.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to hear about your personal journey.
Can we go back one slide, Max, to the first slide before you, okay. So when I think about curation for me, when I think about curation for me, it's about a communication between the artist and the body of work. And part of what I do is I ask questions and I delve in. And so I was born in San Diego. And that's where I am right now in isolation. I'll be going back to Europe soon, but right now I'm in San Diego. And my entire life, I wanted to be an artist. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I wanted to do that. And in terms of, you know, my family, my origin, that was something that nobody had ever wanted to do that before. So
When did you realize that?
I think in kindergarten. I mean, I always wanted to be an artist. And I was also always networking. I was talking to my brother recently about when he was in seminary school, because my brother's been a priest since I was 12. He's quite a few years older than me. He's 15 years older than me. And when I was 12, when I was quite young, like 4 and 5, he would be in seminary school and I'd be sitting outside meeting the other priests and bringing them in and introducing them to him. And that's what I do in my practice. I connect. And it's so funny to see how long that is and how much a part of that is to who I am as a person, but also how it's part of my practice. So I always wanted to be an artist. I didn't know how. I tried everything from macrame to trying to sing, act, you name it, I tried it. And then if you can go to the next slide, at 17, so I fell into photography. That's me on the left with my Pentax K1000 at a punk rock show in San Diego. I discovered punk rock and photography at the same time. And I was so fortunate to fall into the scene that was happening in San Diego where people were renting halls and bringing bands from different locations. And there was this amazing sense of community, something that I didn't have in high school. I wasn't a big fan of high school. I didn't get on well there with most people. I've been bullied a lot growing up. And so for me, this was a whole new world. And I found my voice in photography. It was easy for me. And it was interesting because in some ways I didn't value it as much as all my other efforts because it was so easy. And, but I knew also it was my way to communicate. It was my language. And so I moved to San Francisco when I was 20 and I went to college and got my degree there and went through a number of kind of, I wouldn't say they were dead end jobs, but they were jobs that paid the rent, but didn't pay my soul. And they weren't artistic. I mean, I did work in labs, but I was a technician or I was a receptionist, or I wrote subscription marketing letters for advertorial magazines, which are magazines that exist solely to sell products. That was the kind of work I was doing in San Francisco until I was 38. And I was doing my own work on the side. I was doing my own photography on the side, but I wasn't living fully in a creative life. So if you want to go to the next slide, at the age of 38, I decided to move to Ireland, not to look for my roots and not for any other reason, except I was looking for a way to bring art more fully into my life. So at first I was washing dishes and working as a waitress, a bad waitress. I ran a hostel, and then I applied for residency at Sirius. And this is the art center that I ran in Cove. When I first came there, I was an artist in residence and I had an exhibition. And the day before the exhibition opened, the woman who was running the center took a job in Galway and asked me if I would run this place for 2 months. And I didn't want to go back to washing dishes, so I said yes. And Sirius is an amazing art center. It still exists. It's in Cove, County Cork, which is about 20 minutes from Cork City. And it's a multidisciplinary organization. It has a residency program. It organizes music concerts, exhibitions, visual art exhibitions of all sorts, outreach. And I was there as an artist. I had an exhibition there, and then I became the arts administrator, which was basically the artistic director, but that was what they called it. And I ended up staying there for 14 years. And it was an amazing experience. It was for anyone who's ever worked in a nonprofit, it's an all-consuming job to work for a nonprofit, because not only are you curating and organizing the stuff, but you're also fundraising for the building. And this building is over 150 years old, and it's the first yacht club in the world, and it's situated on the second biggest natural harbor in the world, which is Cork Harbor. If you can go to the next slide, please.
And Peggy, yeah. This was before there were very many curatorial studies programs or even arts administration programs. So I'm thinking you you picked up these skills, you learned them because you had to, you learned them on the job.
Yeah, I mean, I really learned everything by the seat of my pants. And also at that point in time, photography was not strong in Ireland. There were 2 museums that showed work, or 2 galleries that showed work full time, but otherwise there weren't really any programs. There were some programs in photography, but very few. Most of Irish photographers had to leave the country to get educated in and develop their practice. That's much different now. So it was a good time. It was a multidisciplinary arts organization, but I pushed to bring photography into that center. So in 2005, Cork was European Capital of Culture. And again, I saw how accessible photography was as an art form, how audiences really could relate to it. I worked with Simon Norfolk during the Capital of Culture, and he did an artist in residence with the Irish Army. And so after that, I thought maybe it would be good to do a photo festival in Cork. There were no photo festivals in Ireland at that point. So I started going to photo festivals to learn what they were. And that's when I started going to FotoFest. And I was able to offer artists to come and be in residence at Sirius. And a lot of people were very interested in Ireland because they didn't know anything about, they had these kind of dreams about leprechauns, and, they didn't really know what Ireland was. So this is the work of Gilles Perrin, and I invited, the first time I went to FotoFest, I met Gilles and Nicole, his wife, and I invited them to Ireland, and they made this very important document on the fishing industry using large format camera. They came multiple times. It was a really important time to make this document because the fishing industry was disappearing, because the Celtic tiger and the economy was tanking, basically. So most of the people in these photographs are no longer working in fishing. We were able to work not only with East Cork, where I was, but also West Cork, which is quite far. Cork is a very large county. It's about 3 hours to get to West Cork. So they were working in both areas.
Oh, wow.
And we were able to create this very important document. So if you can go to the next slide. Some of you might know Doug Dubois. I met Doug again at the meeting place in FotoFest. And this is really important for people who go to the meeting place. I did not review Doug's portfolio. A colleague brought Doug to me. And I was really taken with his work, and I asked him if he wanted to come to Ireland. And he wasn't sure because he'd never really done a residency before. And we had a very long conversation about how an artist in residency is not always about the product, it's about the process. And this is part of being a curator as well, is respecting the process and realizing that you might not get a product at the end of the process. It may lead to something else. So when Doug came, he didn't know what he was going to do. And the last day he was there, he attended a birthday party of the young woman on the right. And she was turning 18, as was her partner. And he came, when I picked him up to bring him back to the art center, he said to me, "I think I finally got the photographs." So I said, go away and look at it and come back to me. And if you have something, we'll invite you back. So we did. And then we invited him back again. And then we invited him back again. So if you can go to the next slide. And we invited him back again. And he made this amazing project called My Last Day at 17, which was later exhibited internationally. It was a book through Aperture. And he won a Guggenheim in part for this work.
Wow.
So we really put Cove on the map. So that was kind of amazing to me that we were able to bring him. He also engaged with local artists, local photographers. So I was really proud of the work I did at Sirius. And I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of that work was due to the photo festivals that I was attending, and the artists I was meeting, and the networks I was building. And my networks are still incredibly important to me. It's what keeps me going in this time and helps me. That's what In Transit is, actually. It comes out of a partnership with another curator. So if you want to go to the next slide, after being in Ireland for 14 years, I was ready to move on. I started having dreams about missing planes. I was just always having these dreams about missing planes, and I knew I needed to go somewhere else, but I didn't know where. And Elie Domit, who had just started a gallery in Dubai called East Wing, asked me if I would be his artistic director. And I knew it was a commercial gallery, but I knew I didn't know anything about commercial galleries, but he was quite supportive and said, you know, just come and it'll be fine. So I decided to move to Dubai from Ireland. And I only stayed in Dubai for about a year. East Wing is not a typical commercial gallery. The artists that we work with all engage in very deep research. And so this, like what you see here, is the work of Christo and Andrew, and this was curated by them. And they're a collaborative team that works quite far apart. But we don't, like right now, we don't have a physical space. So we've been working online for the last 2 years. And I think right now, with the advent of more use of technology, that will be evident in what East Wing does going forward. So I'm working on some ideas right now, but I was really fortunate to be brought to Dubai. I'm really fortunate to continue to work with East Wing and our sister gallery, which is Al Makhriya, which is in Doha, and they're more painting, sculpture, drawing, and it's very Middle East, where East Wing is strictly photography and lens-based and international. So this actually led me to In Transit. So if we can go to the next slide. And In Transit is, it was really, again, it was to talk about this limbo-like existence and the idea of home, and how the artists the artists that presented work have all had some sense of displacement or a special understanding of displacement.
And
But mainly,
remind us, you said that you began working on this in 16, 17, something like that?
It was around 2016. Beata Segelska from Gallery Image in Aarhus in Denmark asked me if I would curate something for her, and she left it pretty wide open. And I didn't want to just curate anything. I wanted it to be important, and I wanted to address something that was happening around me. And so I'd been working with Tanya and also with George, and they were doing these long-term projects. And I felt they were looking at the issue in a different way. So in the initial exhibition, they were in, Gohar was in, Steffi was in, and also Omar Imam, who is not in the touring show. But it had such a strong response that I started to show. They had fortunately done a catalog, which I was able to show to my colleagues, and Chris Rauschenberg, Heather Schneider at SF Camera Work, and Chantal Paul at San Diego State University Downtown Gallery in the US took an interest. And it was, again, community. I was able to do what I had done at Sirius to bring these 3 organizations together to share this show. And we traveled it down the coast of California last year, and then it went to London Art Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and exhibited there. And then I showed it to the Crawford in Cork, and they have it now. The gallery is closed presently, but it will reopen on the 29th, and then it will go to Stadtgalerie Saarbrücken in Germany in September.
In September, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if we can go to the next slide. So Stephanie Sophia Schultz, this gives you an idea of the kinds of, when I say the artists have explored displacement and have a special understanding. Stephanie was actually born in a placement camp in Germany. Her mother had moved to this housing estate that was for Polish and Russian immigrants, and her mother had German roots. That's why she was able to come there. So Steffi was born in a placement camp. She presently lives in Berlin, and she studied at Kreuzschule in Berlin, the university there. And I met Steffi at Arles. I mean, I kind of bring in how I met these artists as well, because I think that's relevant to FotoFest. I'd seen her exhibition in Arles, and I really was taken with the work. If you can go to the next slide, please. Steffi, because she had this experience of growing up in a placement camp, she knew what it was like to be a young person, and she had come through there after studying photography. This place is in the Lebach-Yarbach. It's called Lebach-Yarbach is the area, and it's near Luxembourg in France. It's on the border near there. These people are only supposed to be in this camp for a year. Many of them are there for 15 years or more. And Steffi had come through there with a boyfriend who had papers that need to be signed. And she saw all these kids and started to connect with them. If you can go to the next slide. And one of the things I think her work really captures is the boredom. And as a young person, boredom is so immense. It's such an immense thing. It's painful, boredom is. If you can go to the next slide. And it also, her work also shows, you know, sort of the physical damage that was done to some of these and psychological challenges that these young people face without saying anything, you know, just by showing it through portraiture. If you can go to the next slide. But at the end of the day, they're also young people. So she had images of them getting ready to go out and playing. Next slide, please. So I was really moved by this work. And I feel like it, although it is documentary in a sense, there's something about it that makes it a little bit more alive. And I think it's, again, like with Doug, she's focusing on young people. And young people are at the forefront of immigration and migration. They're probably the most vulnerable characters in that story. So if you can go to the next slide. So Gohar Dashti is from Iran. She was born on the Iran-Iraq border and grew up during the war. Her father did not move the family because he felt that was their home. And she remembers walking to school and having her father cover her eyes at one point, as you see in this image. And she thought it was a game. And it turned out that it was because they were passing the hospital and he didn't want her to see the bodies. If we can go to the next image. So Gohar works very much, her work is about the physical and psychological ideas of home. What is that? And these are shot in Kesh, which is a island off the coast of Iran in Persia, in the Persian Gulf. And so this is all staged. These are not refugees. And part of what I wanted to address with the exhibition was that how do we use our tools as in our narration, in our narratives to tell our story? If you can go to the next slide.
And is she still living and working in Iran?
She spends some time in Iran, but right now she's splitting her time between Iran and she's living in Boston.
Okay.
So she's in between, and they have she's there with her husband and their young child. What as I said earlier with In Transit, what I wanted to do was also talk about photography. So that's why I included her work, because I felt like it, you know, it's staged, but still it touches very much on ideas of loss, on movement, of migration. If you can go to the last slide. The next slide, I mean, and also that it's a very old story. You know, this didn't just start happening the last few years. This has been going on since the beginning of civilization. Populations have moved for different reasons, but they have moved. And I think that's really important to remember. If we can go to the next slide. So George Audi is an artist who was born in Boston. He's of Lebanese descent. And his work deals a lot with citizenship, nationality, and sexuality. He splits his time between Lebanon and in Beirut and Qatar. He was teaching in Doha, but he's originally American. So he has this sense of, you know, displacement. It's chosen. He's going back, you know, he's going to the Middle East. He's choosing to do that. But he has this idea, as many of us do, of multiple homes. So he works with a large format camera. If you can go to the next slide. And he originally studied painting, and you really see that in his work. I always say that George and Doug have this gift of light. They really understand light, and you really feel it in their work. George works with the large format camera, so he's working 4x5. It's a very slow, meticulous process. He's engaging with these young men over a very long period of time. If you can go to the next slide. You see, again, you see the idea of painting and his background in the work, in the way he composes images. So these young men are living, they're from Syria, and they're living under bridges and on private beaches. And he has these long-term relationships with them. So as you're watching the work, you see these young men get older. If you can go to the next slide. And he juxtaposes this with urban landscapes in Beirut and Cairo, so you can get a sense of where they are. Next slide. And again, this sense of boredom, kind of no actual connection. The one thing that's really amazing about this work, if you can go to the next slide, is the level of intimacy that is growing between the photographer and his collaborators. And these are collaborators. You know, with all of this work, I think the subjects really collaborate with the artist. So when they moved on and they went to places like different parts of Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, and throughout Europe, if you can go to the next slide, they would send him images via WhatsApp. And so we included these images in the exhibition. So these are actually shot by the men he's working with. If you go to the next slide. So they talk about when they get married, when they have kids. If you can go to the next slide. We also include a series of Polaroids in the show, which is in the vitrine there. Because he works with a large format camera, he tests the lighting with Polaroids. And again, as you look at these Polaroids, they're not perfect. They're this kind of ephemera, this kind of artifact of their engagement. And you do see these men get older in the pictures. They're very young in the beginning and they start to get older. So it's a really, again, it's about this idea of displacement and loss and being in between, but it's also about the relationship between the photographer and his collaborators and the tools that he uses to communicate their story. If you can go to the next screen, please. So that brings us to Tanya Habjuka, who was born in Jordan. She moved to Texas when she was 4, and she spent most of her life in Texas, but she moved back and she would visit Jordan, but she spent most of her life in Texas. And she moved back to the Middle East in 2002. She now lives in Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, with her husband and 2 kids. And so she again, Tanya is very collaborative in the work she does. Again, very interested in gender and how the representation of gender and otherness, how does that take place in the world around her? When we think about refugees and migration, I think a lot of us photographically think about National Geographic, we think about the New York Times. What I wanted to show in this exhibition was that there are a number of ways to tell this story that isn't, that can put the audience in the place of, in the footsteps of these people. Tomorrow there will be apricots is a saying from the Levant, which basically means dream on, it's never gonna happen. And that's another thing that you hear a lot is this idea of don't dream too big if you're gonna be in this position. And in this image, Hala is showing us her interpretation of what that saying means by interacting with Tanya. And she performs a lot for Tanya. So there's a great performative aspect in this show as well. One of the things about the people who are living in this, who are depicted in this series, they're women and young people living in a housing estate or living in a house that has a giant banner on the front that says the House of the Martyred Wives. So they've come from Syria. Their husbands are either fighting in a war in a country they can't return to. Many of them are killed, or they've gone on to try to make a better life for them. And they're stuck in this limbo, in this land that, in this building. And many of the young women can't exit the building because if they walk outside and they know that they've come from this building, they're immediately preyed upon because they know there's no male force there to, there's no father, there's no full family. So a lot of times the girls are kept inside, which causes great frustration for them. Women and children are on the front line when it comes to immigration and migration.
Tanya's expressed that so beautifully and symbolically through this image, the visual play between the shadow of the architecture behind her and the embroidery of the curtains in front of her, and sort of portraying harder and softer, possibly masculine and feminine kind of barriers that this woman is in. It's very powerful.
Well, the room, I mean, the idea of being in a room, we really tried to play on that. And I'll show you an image towards the end of this section that gives you that sense in the Crawford. The one thing that's really beautiful about this show is every time we show it, it gets tweaked a little bit. We add something new, or something has changed in regards to what's happening around us, and we try to speak to that. One of the very important aspects of this body of work is the importance of mobile phones to people who are refugees and migrants. They use it as a navigation tool, but it's also a talisman for them. It's where they keep all their photographs, their love letters to each other, their personal messages. But you know, when those mobile phones die, they immediately lose that history. They immediately lose that personal keepsake, that, you know, their history, it just evaporates. So Tanya found out about this in a very interesting way. There was a child who was crying and could not be calmed. And the mother took her mobile phone and immediately turned on the sound of the child's father singing a lullaby. And the child immediately calmed down and became placid. And so she created a short video, which I'm going to show you a very short part of that now, that gives you a sense. And when you see the show, you're actually, we had these on small screens initially so that you would get the sense of a mobile phone, but in the Crawford, we actually have it in a very kind of confining room. So if you want to run that short video for me. And it's called Syria via WhatsApp.
يا رب شلونك؟ يا رب شلونك؟ أنت مليح؟
مساء الخير يا رنود، كيفك أنت بابا؟ إن شاء الله بخير، وهاي أحلى ورداتي لك يا بابا، وكمان بيعطيك بوسي ها.
بابا مرحبا شلونك؟ شو أخبارك؟ جيب لي روب أبيض مثل تبع لنا وزهري ونهدي. كيفك أبي؟ إن شاء الله منيح. شلونك؟ إن شاء الله أوضاعك؟ شلون الجو عندك؟ شو عم تعمل؟ شو أكلت اليوم؟
والله أنا الحمد لله. أنت شو أخبارك يا أبي؟ إن شاء الله عم تروح على المدرسة؟ صيرة شاطرة ها؟
أخيرا بهالصوت والله يا قلب. لكن يا منيس يا أخي الحمد لله أن أمورنا تمام. بدي ألمك من كل البلاد العرب، لأنه أمي بلاد العرب والله العظيم ما فيها غير الذل. الله العظيم بجيبك وعايشك أحلى عيشة، أحسن من كل الأوب اللي عندك هناك، كل أخوات منك والله يا منيس. أما بتيجي لهون معزز مكرمة. العظيم يا محمد مشتاق لك، مشتاق اقعد معك، اجي وينك الصبح قاعد اسوي لك القهوه من تحت ايدي يا منيس.
So this gives you an idea of the power of those messages. But the one thing I really think it shows is everybody, you know, the people in these video, the people in that who are exchanging those messages, they all want what we want. I mean, the kids want the same dress that their friends have. Their, you know, their husband misses having coffee with them in the morning. It was to humanize the story. If you can skip to the next image and then the next one, because that's just, yeah, to the next one. So that is an image of a woman who has a picture of her beloved. The next image she received of him on her phone was of him dead. So if you can go to the next image. Also, again, this idea of women being struggling, like educational opportunities are zero. In this case, the girl was 15. They were living in a building, and the landlord came to the mother and said, if you give me your daughter, you can live here for free. And she said no, and he kicked them out, and she had to come to the house of the martyred wives. If you can go to the next image. Again, this is Hala, who ended up being put into an arranged marriage. And the night of the marriage, she was beaten by the mother-in-law for 6 days till she escaped. And the mother-in-law said that the husband was not treating her mean enough. So Hala returned to her mother and said, I have to get a divorce. And they had to fight the family. And thankfully, they were able to get her dowry back and she was able to be free. But this is her showing Tanya what it was like, how she danced and how she cried on the night of this wedding. If you can go to the next image. That's the installation that we did in the Crawford to give that sense of claustrophobia. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster for time's sake. So if we can go to the next image. And finally, this is the work of Daniel Castro Garcia. This is a long-term project that was begun in 2015. As I said, you know, he started it because of what he was seeing in the media, really upset him. And he's using different media. He's using film as well as still. And as the project is still developing, and the boys' voices are coming in more and more. So it was really important. Dignity was really important to him in terms of bringing dignity to his subjects, to his collaborators, and they are collaborators again. He traveled to multiple hotspots in 2015 where refugees were coming into Italy and started to make these connections. Then he moved to, if you can go to the next image, he ended up moving to Italy with his partner and started photographing in a housing project for young men that's called Zingali Aquino. It was a reception center. There were about 12 sub-Saharan boys living there. Of them, 11 were Muslim. There was no education, no bringing them into any kind of cultural exchange. The only kind of cultural activities they had were the ones that they engaged with Danny and his partner. As you can see, I mean, one of the things he really wanted to show was how these kids are, you know, they love their parents and they're there alone. And yet on his hand, you can see there's a crying eye. So the physical and the psychological damage that they're undergoing. If you can go to the next slide. They're praying in makeshift mosques that they create in the space. This reception center no longer exists, and all these boys have been spread out to all corners now. So Danny is working with them to try to bring them in, to keep in touch with them and see what how their journey is changing. And if you can go to the next slide. And also he wanted to show how similar the background can be. So this is on the right-hand side is Hamadou, and this is him in Sicily. And then on the other side is his sister, Tita, and she is in Senegal. We have a film in the exhibition. It's like a video portrait of Hamadou praying in Sicily, but the soundtrack is from Senegal. And if you can go to the next image. He also traveled to Senegal with Ali, who's been a longtime collaborator in the first episode of, there have been many chapters to this. This is sort of the second chapter of the project. And he went back to, with Ali back to his home. And it was the first time Ali had been back, and who's also known as Gucci, had been back in 7 years. And there was immense pressure on him to show sort of like some kind of prosperity. Of course, this young man is suffering and struggling to try to find work. So one of the things that I think is really important about this first part of Danny's work is that we hear the voices of the young men. So I'm going to show you again, finally, this is the last thing I'm going to show you, the journey of Gucci's journey. And it's Ali talking about what it was like for him to come to leave home. And he explains quite well why people migrate. And so I'm just going to show you that part of the video. So if you can run that, that would be great. Nope. Oop. Well, I mean, I think it's really important to hear his voice. So
Yeah.
are we okay, Max? Are we going to be able to show that?
I'm just checking with Max. There we
Here
go.
we go. Okay, there we go. Thanks.
Per me spiegare l'influenza dell'immigrazione è facile. Tu prendi una camera, metti là dentro un gatto, 2 giorni tu non gli dai a mangiare, non gli dai a bere, la camera è chiusa. Se tu hai dimenticato di chiudere il finestrino e dopo 2 giorni il gatto hai visto che il finestrino non è chiuso, che fa il gatto? Ma si scappa, passa per il finestrino e si scappa, il colpo di fame, perché il gatto sa bene che se rimane là muore di fame dentro la camera. Allora se lui ha visto l'unica possibilità è il finestrino per uscire, che fa? Uno non può stare senza mangiare, senza bere. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Arrahmanirrahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghayril maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
So that's just one part of that video, but I think, you know, it really gives the collaborators the possibility to have their voices heard, and even more so now Danny's working further in that and bringing them into the project. So that gives you an overview. I know that's a lot of information. Sorry, I was really rattling off there quickly, but I wanted to get it all out because I feel it's really important. Someone asked if the full videos are available. Danny's is not. You have to go to the exhibition. Tanya does have a Vimeo link that we might be able to share. I'll have to just make sure that's okay with her.
And how can people see more about the exhibition online? I know that various host venues have websites about it. So
yeah, so I can send those to you. Also, there is a catalog that is available through Blue Sky Books of the whole show. We were fortunate when we did the show at Blue Sky that Chris does print on demand, Chris Rauschenberg. So he organized it, and we've been able to add the new partners every time. So that's really fantastic as well, that we're able to have that available. So that's through Blue Sky Books, and I can send you the link for that.
yeah, I've been, people can Google that. Blue Sky's got a really robust publication program now through that on demand. And then there's at the Crawford Art Gallery, there's a webpage about in transit.
Yeah, there is an online exhibition. Yeah, yeah.
You know what was so powerful for me about the last video was We've seen a lot of work about the global refugee crisis, and we've also seen a lot in the media about the global refugee crisis. But there's often little that talks about why someone is fleeing. It's more, especially in the news media, it's more presented as a challenge or a problem to a state or to the refugees themselves. So I just found that very powerful, that the why is addressed, and that was a very strong metaphor.
Well, and also, when we look at the media, the people are not personalized. We don't know who they are. We don't know their stories. We just see chaos. And I think, if you wanted to take it back to what's happening in the US right now, I mean, that's becoming more personal than ever before. And that's kind of what I really saw in the exhibition, is that we start to know who Hala is. We know who, Gucci is. We start to get a relationship with them, and they become real people, not just, something we see on the news at 5 o'clock. And also, these artists work for very long periods of time. They're not flying in for 6 months. For 6 weeks or 6 days to cover a story. They're working with their collaborators for years. And still, it's saying, like, Danny's still working. Tanya still goes back to Jordan and works with people there.
And have any of the artists also done long form storytelling about these subjects through other platforms?
Well, Tanya is a member of the NOR agency. Gohar just has multiple projects that look at these ideas of home, and you can go to her website and see those. Same with Tanya, you can go to her website and see some of the things that I can't show. We have GIFs in the exhibition that include poetry in Syrian, and then you can read the actual words of what these young people are saying. Danny has a website as well that you can visit. Danny won the W. Eugene Smith Award in 2017, and he also, for this project, and also the British Journal of Photography International Photography Award in 2017. Steffi has now had her second child, so she's sort of focusing on family right now. And George he's taken his website down for the moment. He's in a period of process changing. So there was some work through Lightwork. He did a residency with Lightwork in Syracuse, and one of the past contact sheets has his work in that as well.
Okay, that's great. That's great. We've got all those here at FotoFest. And can you see those online? I think you can. Yeah?
I think so. I'm not sure what Shane has available.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to see if there's any other questions from the audience. Thank you, Cheryl, for that question about the videos. And thanks, Selena, for your comment. It was good to see you here. I see a lot of friends in the room here on the Zoom call, which is it's wonderful to see you all. I wanted to ask you, you got into photography as a practitioner through music, which was very close to your heart. And I wondered, there's a lot of political content in the work that you're doing through East Wing. And I wondered if that, where that lies for you in your area of interest, in that intersectional with photography. Have you found that to be the most important place to work?
Well, for me, art has always been it's always come from here, not from here. And so humanity, I think it's so important that we recognize each other's humanity, and it's really astounding how much we don't, how much it's easier to pigeonhole people and label people. And so a lot of the work that I do, I'm fortunate to work with amazing artists that focus on issues like plastic pollution, or the case of what these artists are doing, where they're looking at real people's lives and saying, this is happening, wake up, this is happening around you. And I've always I've always tried to, and I think that's why I wanted to live abroad for so long as a young person. That wasn't something that happened in our family, but I've been curious. I've always been seeking, you know, to learn about different cultures and different ideas. So I think that comes into my practice as a curator. And also as a curator, and I think that Fazil touched on this in the last creative conversation, that it's about creating an atmosphere. It's an atmosphere that allows people to transcend what they understand, to be able to look at it from a different point of view and to walk away changed. And I feel that In Transit does that for so many people, because they walk in with an idea of what it means. You know, this is what it means to be a refugee. And then they walk away with a completely different understanding that it could be them. Just like when we work with someone like Mandy Barker, who's working in plastic pollution, and be able to have people realize that everything you touch is plastic, and maybe you didn't think about that before. So for me, it's trying to draw attention to what should be obvious, but we don't see it.
It's noticing, it's observing, and it's bringing attention to it.
It's about making your world bigger. You know, it's really about making your world bigger.
For all of us. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Peggy Sue. This has been really great. I love hearing more about your background. You know, we've connected through music over the years too, as well as art. And so that's been a lot of fun. It was great to see that photo of you at the concert, but also to hear about your development through Cork and through coming to East Wing.
And I think it's really important that photographers realize that you have this network of both professionals and your peers, and how you need to rely on that. I mean, that's what keeps me going.
And I think that's something that's been great about us realizing how useful this platform can be, Zoom or any other, you know, Skype or Teams or whatever you're using, in terms of keeping in touch and keeping connected, which is so important right now, when we're all separated, but we can all be connected too.
Well, when this whole thing happened, I started meeting with a group of female curators from around the world, and we have a meeting every Wednesday, and it's our sanity. It's like an hour and a half where we talk about ideas and projects, but we also just check in with each other. And they range from the US to Italy to London to France. And it's been really something that's helped me keep my sanity while I've been in between. Like, I'm not at home. Like, again, talking about home, I'm at home. I'm where I grew up, but it's not my home, you know? Right. So it's been, we need to rely on each other. And I think that's part of what the arts does so well. When this whole pandemic happened, and I was asked by a few people, you know, what would you like to see come out of it? And my response was, I hope people will remember the importance of community. And I'm seeing that happen through this. I mean, we're able to engage much easier. It's not the same as being together. Unfortunately, it really is not. I can't be reviewing online and have you know, my colleague come to my table and go, look at this work. You know, that is a real life thing that has to happen. You don't stumble onto things in the same way, but it is important, and it's an incredible tool.
That will return eventually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll have both, yeah, so that'll be good.
Forever changed, I think. One last thing, you know, you mentioned when we were chatting the other day, you mentioned an artist friend of yours who I think is based in Berlin, who is doing a daily project.
Yes.
And I wondered, I think it'd be great for you to share that with the audience. I really enjoyed.
I would be really happy to, and she'd be thrilled to. Unfortunately, today was the last day, but April Gertler, who is from California originally, has started a project. Well, she's been doing a project throughout this pandemic called Telex, and every day she hangs a different word out her window on a banner, and the word stays out for 12 hours. And then it's replaced with another word. And she pins these, they're fabric. She was pinning them. It takes an hour and a half to pin the word. And so when it started, it was all very much focused on the idea of isolating and staying in contact and community. But then with Black Lives Matter becoming more and more an issue, and specifically Breonna Taylor, those words have suddenly become about that. And today was the last day, and the final word was, she started with hi and she ended with tschüss, which is bye in German. But some of the words have come from people she knows, and they're German and English. If you go to her Instagram, which is April Gertler, you will see the whole, and the other thing that's beautiful is you watch the banner fade over this period of time from the sun, and it shows how we're being, you know, for me, it's like, yeah, we're worn down. We're all worn down for different reasons, you know, because of pandemic, because of isolation, because of what's happening in the streets. But it's creating this community through this idea of you know, this telex, this project that is so simple and yet so powerful.
Yeah, and I've seen it on social media. It's very
really beautiful.
And it's good to talk about. We have a question from Paula. Can you spell the artist's name, April's name?
It's April, like the month, and her second name is Gertler, Gertler.
And we had another
Picture Berlin in Berlin, the program there.
And we had another comment about the strength of your commentary in talking about the work that you showed today, and I'm sure that there's similar material in the catalog that you produced, and when you go to see the exhibition. So thanks for that clip.
Also, the captions for the work are very in depth. I did not do them justice, I can tell you that for sure. You know, all the artists are very they're very sensitive to the artists they work with. They want them named. They want you to know what their story is. They don't just put up an image and go, it's a woman and her kid. You know, they give you much more information than that. And even in Danny's work, another thing that we weren't able to show that is really beautiful is Hamadou, the young man we saw in the, no, sorry, it's Usman. It's another young man. Usman actually created a rap about his journey. And we have it on audio in the exhibition. So you can hear him actually do a rap song that he worked with Danny on to tell his story. And that's, to me, that's so vital to have their voices. Like this time we were able to have some GIFs where we had a woman singing a lullaby to a child, or Hala, she's reciting a poem in Syrian. It's a love poem, but it's really about war, because she hasn't really had the kind of love that you know that we talk about. It, she's just been enduring, and that's really important to me.
As curators, you know, we are making a platform for the artist, and then it's great to see the artists utilizing this platform for their subjects to tell their stories and allow them to tell their stories directly.
Well, that's what I thought was so powerful about African Cosmologies, was that it was a whole different way. I mean, it's such a powerful show, and a beautiful show.
We're very proud of it, and the book is good too, I think. So if you want to learn about it, you've been a real proponent of it. Thank you very much. And it will return. It will be open here in Houston again when the conditions permit. So we're very excited about that. The artists have been very cooperative. There's a lot of relationships between African Cosmologies and In Transit, especially artists like Ida Silvestri, who's showing the plight of refugees from Eritrea going to the United Kingdom and reproducing their journeys in poetry, or Bruno Beaujolais, who has taken copies of iPhone or mobile phone videos of refugees fleeing Algeria to get to Europe, and sort of documenting those on the phone, which is just two of many of the artists that are there. So, well, it's getting to about time to wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Peggy Sue.
Oh, my pleasure. And somebody asked if the show was going to be in the US. We did show in the US last year. We do still have the work in the US. If there's any organizations that are interested, please contact me. Same as in Europe, we have work there that we can create the show again. It will be reopening this week in the Crawford Gallery in Cork. And then it's going to Saarbrücken in Germany in September. So if you're in those places, you can see it live and in person. I really appreciate you asking me to be here. It was really nice to be able to talk about the work.
It's been a pleasure for us and so enlightening. Thanks again. Thanks to the audience. Thanks to Max Fields and Vinod Hobson, our team here at FotoFest that helped make these talks happen. We'll have more talks, a full schedule coming to you in July and August, and we'll have news about that soon. And in the meantime, given yesterday being Juneteenth, today being World Refugee Day, and I didn't even mention that it's Pride Month here in the United States for LGBTQIA people. Just a reminder of the theme of World Refugee Day this year. Every action counts. Every action counts.
Absolutely.
Action. Thank
I
you.
think people should ask themselves every day what they can do. What can I do today? I think that's really important.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.